they become osteocytes, and they stay in the bone tissue and help maintain it throughout your life. Before you're born, there's two main ways that the bones develop. One is in sheets of connective tissue, and that's usually for bones that are fairly flat, like in the skull, where the osteoblasts will move into the middle of the sheet and just form a layer of bone in there. Long bones, ribs, and a few others start out as cartilage rather than just a more generic connective tissue. So there would be a chunk of cartilage, roughly the shape that the bone is going to be, usually a little less detailed. Then the osteoblasts come in and start building the bone from a couple of different areas and grow towards each other. When a bone forms from cartilage, at birth there's still some cartilage left. There's the articular cartilage on the ends. So bones that form from other connective tissue that are going to have a joint, they need to grow articular cartilage on them. Whereas these guys, it's just left over. The other one is epiphyseal plates, which is in the epiphysis, right at the edge of the diaphysis, and those are the growth plates, areas where the bone can get longer. So that's how your bones grow, or at least your long bones. Other bones can just like put more layers on the outside and get bigger all around. But for long bones to get longer, you have to have this area of cartilage. The cartilage grows from the middle, but then the edges get turned into bone as it goes. So the whole thing gets longer without the cartilage getting any thicker, if that makes sense. But around puberty, new hormones make the bone take over faster, and once the whole plate is ossified, turned into bone, that's when growth stops. And then there's usually a strip of compact bone there in the middle of the bone. We call it an epiphyseal line. You can tell in an X-ray if somebody is still growing, because where the bone comes out as white because it's blocking the X-rays, the cartilage lets them through, and so it comes out as a darker strip. Now this, I can tell from the bone shapes, is probably a knee. Yeah, because there's the other bone. So this is somebody who's young enough to still be growing. Questions on bone growth and development? Now, your bones don't just grow and then sit there like rocks in your body. The cells in them allow for building and breaking down bone matrix over time, and that's called bone remodeling. Most of the time, it doesn't make an obvious difference to the bone. It's just, we need a little more calcium now, so let's take some out. Okay, now we have some extra, let's put some back in. Building new matrix, and this is still osteoblasts, not the same ones that ossified originally because they turned into osteocytes, but new ones from the outside. When they build matrix, it's called bone deposition, like they're depositing matrix. Breaking down bone matrix is called resorption, like reabsorption, contracted together. And that's done by cells called osteoclasts. So, osteoblasts, B for build, osteoclasts. You can say crash or catastrophe or anything else that helps work to remember that clast is breaking something down. The calcium will get released into circulation, and you need to have the right amount of calcium in circulation for your muscles and nerves to work right.
What did you say for osteoblasts?
Osteoblasts build, so B for build. Hormones are the main regulation of remodeling. There are hormones that control blood calcium levels to keep them even. And then other hormones that regulate growth, like growth hormone and the sex hormones that start getting released in puberty. Exercise can affect bone remodeling. If you're doing weight-bearing exercise like hiking or even just standing up a lot, that will increase bone deposition. It's basically your bones are telling your body that they need to be stronger to do all this work that you're having them do. And exercise like swimming, where the water supports your weight, it's still great for cardiovascular, but it's not going to make your bones stronger.
Would running on a treadmill do that?
Yeah, running, whether it's out in the world or on a treadmill, would do it because you're putting your weight on your legs. Bones can also be remodeled in small ways when there's more stress put in a particular area. We're going to look at some of the bumps on the bones, like this. These are places where muscles attach. They start off smaller and smoother, and as you start using your muscles as you grow up and pulling on those bones, they become larger and thicker. And that's a form of bone remodeling. Then there are things that can happen in specific situations where the stress is maybe a little unusual and the bones adjust to it. The stereotypical bow-legged cowboy, it's not that their bones are soft and they're bending when they lean on them, it's that they're actually curved, because as you ride a horse and you squeeze with your inner thighs, you're putting pressure there. So the osteoclasts come and remove a little bit of bone, but to keep it from getting weaker overall, then your osteoblasts build more on the other side. Let's just look from the outside of the bone. And over time, the bone becomes curved. Questions on bone remodeling? So, bone functions, the major ones are done just by the bones existing. They don't have to do anything actively to support your body, protect soft organs. Their involvement in movement, skeletons for Halloween, by normal physiological means, would never be able to move because you have to have muscles to pull on the bone. Some kind of magic would have to be moving them. But what the bones do is they provide some leverage, something for the muscles to pull on. Where the joints are determines where you're able to bend. Brain and heart are two examples where you've got plates of bone to protect them. Other functions, you've got blood cell formation in the red marrow and mineral storage, especially calcium, but some other minerals that are just stored as part of the bone matrix. So, if your calcium levels change, maybe it's been a while since you ate any calcium, then hormones will be released to fix it. So if it gets too low from where it's supposed to be for best nerve and muscle function, glands called parathyroid release a hormone. I didn't name it because it's just called parathyroid hormone. It's named for the gland. Their hormone stimulates the osteoclasts. You reabsorb or resorb some bone matrix, release the calcium into the plasma and increase the levels. If your calcium is higher, say you just binged on cheese and now you're absorbing extra calcium, or you took a really big calcium supplement and it's all there at once, then your thyroid gland, which is right next to the parathyroid, and that's why they have a similar name, releases a hormone called calcitonin. So calcium, tonin, like tones your bones, and that stimulates osteoblasts. They take the extra calcium out of the plasma and store it in your bones. So this loop, as your calcium levels change, is the main thing affecting bone remodeling. And as long as you're getting enough calcium over time, it's going to balance itself out. Questions on bone function? Let me have a quick look at how much we've got left here. We'll go ahead and finish the bone parts, and then we'll save joints for next time so we have more time to go over the specific bones that you need to know for lab. Bone fractures is a clinical application here. There are several types of fractures that I'm not going to go into, but if that's something you expect to work with in, say, pediatrics or sports medicine, maybe an ER, then you might find it worth looking at. Regardless of the type, they're going to follow the same basic pattern to heal. When you break a bone, you also break blood vessels. So the first thing that happens is that the blood clots. And that's called a hematoma, which basically means blood mass. And then to repair the bone, we first start by building fibrocartilage. And that just kind of comes in and makes a network through the clot. We call that the soft callus. Now, at this point, it holds your bone together, but it still can't really support that much weight. And then, just like building the bone in the first place, osteoblasts come in and start turning it into bone. And that's called the hard callus. So at that point, your bone is repaired. You can use the area normally, but there's usually some extra tissue, especially on the inside. It usually just heals as compact bone, and then if you need there to be spongy, it gets removed. And that's the remodeling, to clear out extra bone tissue. So here's a step-by-step. That's the hematoma, or the blood clot. Here, the dark is the cartilage coming in. And that gradually gets turned more and more into bone. That's your hard callus. And then we remodel, take out any extra bone. There can be an extra bump on the outside left for some time afterwards. And often on an x-ray, there's a difference in the density of the tissue, so you can see if a bone was broken at some point in the past.
So like, what's the difference between a fracture and a sprain?
A sprain is damaging the connective tissues in a joint, not damaging the bone itself.
So then that top left-hand corner one with the blood, that's what happens when a bone breaks?
Yes. Okay, so that's the first thing that's happening. So even if the bone breaks and stays in place and doesn't damage any tissues around it, it still bleeds because the bone itself has blood vessels. Other questions? There's two main divisions to your skeleton called axial and appendicular. Axial means on the axis, like along the center. That is your skull and spinal column, so the bones that contain the dorsal cavity, plus the ribs and sternum, and something called the hyoid bone that's in the neck. Appendicular skeleton, meaning appendages, things that are attached, includes not just the bones in the limbs, but the ones that attach it to the appendicular skeleton. So your hips and some of the shoulder bones are considered appendicular even though they're in the trunk.
What did you say axial means?
Axial means along the axis. And those bones that hold your arms and legs on are called the pelvic and pectoral girdle.